Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I was elected to the Missouri Senate in 2014, and since then I have chaired the committee that has handled most of Missouri's labor bills, including Missouri's Government Worker Protection Act, House Bill 1413, a comprehensive labor reform bill signed into law last year. Today I appear before you to testify in favor of the rights of states and their political subdivisions to set their own public sector labor policies, and as such, I testify in opposition to the two bills before you today. Private sector collective bargaining has been governed by federal law since President Franklin Roosevelt signed the Wagner Act in 1935. Congress has long recognized the distinction between public sector collective bargaining and the private sector, and has allowed states and local governments accordingly to set their own laws, their own policies in the latter. FDR himself recognized this distinction when he stated, all government employees should recognize that the process of collective bargaining, as usually understood, cannot be transplanted into the public service. It is important to recognize, as did your predecessors, the fundamental differences between government and private sector unions. In the private sector, employers are private companies or individuals. Government, and by extension, the people, are the employers of public sector employees. Government unions, through aggressive political activity, often end up electing their own bosses, potentially leading to conflicts between the interests of citizens and taxpayers and that of the unions. In the private sector, there are natural checks and balances on the power of unions. If union demands make a company uncompetitive, everyone suffers. Witness the US auto industry. These checks and balances are lacking with government unions. If we look at states with the worst fiscal conditions and the highest taxes, such as Illinois, New Jersey, Connecticut, what they all have in common is very strong government unions. I believe that if there's one thing we can agree on here, it is that different states have very different approaches to labor policy. For example, whether collective bargaining is allowed for police, firefighters, and teachers, most allow it. Some mandate it, some ban it, and some allow it to be decided at the local level. And whether these workers should be allowed to strike. These varying policies have evolved over decades. Missouri has allowed public sector collective bargaining since 1965, and since then the policy has been modified from time to time by statute, by decisions of two government agencies, and by hundreds of political subdivisions. Congress has no business centralizing all of this power in the Federal Labor Relations Authority. It would be an enormous federal overreach and a violation of the principle of federalism to do so. And it would also require a massive expansion of the Federal Labor Relations Authority to micromanage labor policy in 50 states and thousands of political subdivisions across our country. Finally, federalization of public sector labor law would preclude reform measures that protect both workers and taxpayers. Examples of such reforms include the provisions of House Bill 1413 passed in Missouri last year. With this bill, we codified the certification process. We gave workers the right to vote every 3 years as to whether they wanted to continue to be represented by a union, gave the workers the right to annually opt in or out of financial payment to unions, and promoted financial transparency similar to federal LM reporting. These protections would be nullified by federal legislation. Alexander Hamilton wrote in Federalist 9 that the proposed Constitution leaves to states possession certain exclusive and very important portions of sovereign power. Our current system of state control of public sector labor relations allows states to use that sovereign power to balance the interests of public employees and unions, citizens, and taxpayers. I urge this committee to reject federal takeover of these very important state functions. Thank you.